I love Christopher Nolan. Ever since I first watched Memento, his first studio-backed industry film, I've been obsessed with his incredibly different and varied filmography. One film is a dark and intense war film, the next is an incredibly unique sci-fi action heist, and the next is a film about the cycle of revenge told through wizards, basically. What I'm trying to say is he's probably my favourite director. While I do have a lot of respect for other directors like Bong Joon-ho, Wes Anderson and Charlie Kaufman, none of them hold a candle to Nolan, whose films have captured both my eyes and heart for years. Memento is my favourite film of all time. The Dark Knight trilogy is one of the best trilogies of the 21st century. Interstellar is a modern 2001, and Inception is Inception. Don't lie, you've seen it and you probably loved it. Nolan is probably the last visionary filmmaker left. With the exception of Spielberg and Scorsese, and a few other smaller ones, he's the only director currently working that can make whatever the hell he wants, whether that be big and loud or small and intimate. He can make whatever he likes. So, why did he choose to do this? Tenet is by no means a bad film. Actually, it's far from it. On a technical level, this film is really good. The visual effects are fantastic, the score is amazing, the editing is pretty great, with the exception to sound mixing, which is utterly awful. On a technical level, this film is really, really great. However, when you break it down and look at it as a movie should be something that guides the viewers through a story, with characters, and has a message or a central theme. It's flawed, it's very flawed. And I kinda knew this would be the case before I even saw the film. There are two types of aesthetical pleasure an audience can take when watching a film: scope or narrative. If audiences take pleasure from narrative, that means they like the story and characters of a film. If audiences take pleasure from the scope, that means they like the spectacle and scope of it all. A film like Marriage Story is a good example of a narrative film. Not much really happens in it in terms of scope. With a budget of only 18 million, the film takes place in only a few locations and sets, and relies heavily on the interactions between characters and the performance of the actors. A film like Avengers Endgame, on the other hand, is a good example of a scope film. A lot happens in terms of scope. With a budget of 356 million, almost 20 times what Marriage Story had, the film takes place all over the globe, with massive action set pieces and A-list celebrities coming out of every nook and cranny. In terms of narrative, there isn't really much. There isn't really a theme to Avengers Endgame or a lesson the audience should take away from the film. The film doesn't prioritise that. It prioritises spectacle and scope for the audience. When Endgame came out, it was an event. Opening night tickets sold out in a matter of minutes. The film broke $1 billion in 3 days. There were constant interviews of actors and crew members promoting the film. It was an event. And that's what it was intended to do. People don't remember Endgame for its performances or deep story, just like people remember Marriage Story for its budget or hype around it. And both those things are fine. The Russo brothers didn't try to force Endgame to have a metaphorical story, and Noah Baumbach? Noah Baumbach? I don't know, man. Didn't try to force Marriage Story to have a globe-trotting adventure. Both aesthetics exist together and work separately. However, as time has gone on and the film industry has become more talented and diverse, the two aesthetics have become somewhat interwoven with each other, creating a third type of aesthetical pleasure mixing both narrative and scope together. Most big budget films now have a lot of heart and love put into their characters and stories, with films like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, basically anything by Pixar, and the Guardians of the Galaxy films. More and more directors find themselves balancing narrative and scope when making a big budget film, and most of them succeed. Emphasis on the most of them. Nolan is no stranger to this balance of scope and narrative. Ever since he first got into Hollywood big leagues with Batman Begins, he's been struggling to balance scope and narrative successfully, and it's clear he's starting to crack under the fan expectations. I think this balance really started to show in The Dark Knight Rises. While I will defend this film to my final breath, it's pretty flawed. There are a lot of plot holes and pacing issues scattered throughout the film, and it's very lengthy in terms of runtime. Why was this the case? With a budget so big, you think he would, try to balance narrative and scope. Well, he did try, and he struggled. It's because Nolan was struggling to balance the scope and narrative of the film. These issues re-emerged with Interstellar, a film that many have criticised for its failure to balance scope and narrative. While Interstellar is a really great film, some of the more personal, emotional moments in the film just fall flat on their face. Why? Because Nolan spent more time with the big set pieces and visuals than he did on developing these characters. So, when it came to the emotional scenes, the audience didn't really care that much. No one remembers Interstellar for Anne Hathaway's corny love speech. They remember it for the water planet scene, the incredible score, and the sarcastic robot. These balancing issues really came to the forefront for me and many others with Dunkirk, which, despite being Nolan's 10th film, felt the most impersonal and honestly amateurish of his entire filmography. I understand the film wasn't trying to tell a story about characters or plot, and the sole reason for its existence was to try and guide the audience through what a soldier would have felt like in the Battle of Dunkirk, and it definitely achieves that. Like Tenet, on a technical level, Dunkirk is great. The mixing, the sound design, the fantastic score, the effects, everything comes together to make a rivetingly intense film to watch. However, Dunkirk doesn't really have a story or characters, more so a random order of events with random people. I don't remember any traits of the soldiers in the film. I remember Hans Zimmer's score. I don't remember any story beats of the film. I remember the astonishing visual effects. And so, me, as someone that prefers narrative aesthetics, left Dunkirk feeling disappointed, even though I did enjoy a lot of what I saw. And so that brings me to Tenet, Nolan's 11th feature-length film. I had high hopes going to this cinema, despite the mixed reviews. Hell, I even bought IMAX tickets for the opening day and travelled into London in the middle of a global pandemic. You could say I was a little excited. I hoped after a year of delays and disappointing releases, Tenet would be the one film I thought about for the rest of the year, like how The Lighthouse and Parasite stayed on my mind in 2019, and Spider-Verse in 2018. However, I left the cinema feeling empty. And that's the best way I can describe this film. Empty. Hollow. Nothing. While technologically jaw-dropping, Tenet is empty and hollow due to its lack of character and story. Like I've said before, Nolan has struggled balancing scope and narrative for so long, it's clear he's just given up and decided to lean all the way into scope, which makes this film feel very hollow. Do you remember any of the defining traits of any of the characters in the film? No, of course you don't, because there aren't any. Elizabeth Debicki has a son, Kenneth Branagh was Russian, Robert Pattinson was Robert Pattinson. These aren't traits. These are small little things that would build up for character development in a properly well-written film, which this is not. Hell, the fact that I don't remember a single character's name from a film I saw twice only a couple of months ago, but I still remember the entire cast of the Lego Movie, a film I saw 6 years ago, is a very bad sign. Tenet is lifeless. There is no heart in the movie. There are no character arcs. There are no fun callbacks. It's a lifeless narrative with a coat of high-budget production hiding its evident flaws. But what if that wasn't the case? What if Nolan had given more runtime to the screenplay and the characters and the narrative? Would the film be better? Yes. Absolutely, yes. Like I've stressed several times through this video, Tenet is a production marvel. In terms of visual effects, score and editing, Tenet is great. In terms of character and narrative, it's flawed at best. If Nolan gave more time to writing interesting characters and relationships between said characters, the film could have been a masterpiece. If Nolan actually tried to balance narrative and scope, the film would have been so good. Why? Well, like I said, it absolutely nails the scope aesthetic. It's fast-paced, it's action-packed, has a massive budget. In terms of scope and spectacle, this film is already a masterpiece. If Nolan was to write a more interesting narrative and characters, it would be an all-around masterpiece, not just in terms of scope. What do we, the audience, actually know about John David Washington's character, the protagonist? Well, nothing, really. We know he's loyal, we know he's charming, I guess, and we know he's a good guy. That's not enough. Okay, fine, let's take a look at another character, Neil. What do we know about him? He's British and he has a good sense of humour? Yeah, that's it. The second lead protagonist in the film has two very, very slim character traits. That's really bad. Apart from Elizabeth Debicki's character, Kat, there are no defining traits to these characters, and even Kat's character is very basic and bare bones. She loves her son and wants the best to him. That's not interesting, that's not original, that's just lazy. A lot of people have compared Tenet to Inception, and I can definitely see the comparisons. Both are high-budget action films with a sci-fi twist, Inception being a heist movie in a dream and Tenet being a spy movie with time travel, but one is much better regarded than the other, and that is Inception. Why? Well, it's because Inception balanced narrative and scope. Cobb is an interesting and compelling character in Inception, and that's what makes so much of Inception work. If Cobb was a hollow, lifeless shell of a man like the protagonist is in Tenet, Inception wouldn't be seen as the modern masterpiece it is. If Tenet had an interesting protagonist like Inception did in the forms of Cobb, the film would be significantly better and more well regarded. But no, it has a boring and generic protagonist that the audience isn't invested in, meaning they are less interested in the story and like the film less. I really want to stress what I liked Tenet. Despite all I've said, it's a good film. It's fast-paced, well shot and edited, and a lot of fun, but I can't escape the fact I think it was a wasted opportunity. Tenet could have been so much more, and it's a shame to see it go this route, wasting a lot of its potential opportunity. I really hope Nolan's next film is something more like his original filmography, something like Memento, that focuses on narrative rather than throwing everything he has at scope.